So when I think of masculinity, I think of form, right? You're building a foundation. You're building the house, right? What do they say? The man builds the house and the woman makes the home, right? So it's the foundation, the structure. When I think of masculinity, I think of physical strength, which then leads to competency, right? So you are capable of carrying physically as well as emotionally. There's a competency which comes with mastering one's craft, mastering one's mind, being a master of one's internal world. To really feel like a man, I guess, from my perspective, men want to feel respected and women want to feel loved. Of course, you want both, of course, on a higher level. But what I see in the behavior of men is that men are more interested in feeling respected than they are loved.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are listening to Don't Be Afraid to Talk podcast with James. I believe if we are going to affect change, we must go back to the basic, which for me, in essence, is conversations. Talking and listening is key for growth, and I hope our stories will bring us together and we can draw inspiration from each other. Conversation will include topics such as mental and physical health, trauma and its effect, suicidal thoughts, recovery, and well-being. We will continue to raise awareness and offer a different perspective, a mindset or an idea that could inspire you to take charge of your well-being and to grow as a human being. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Ask the Expert. Today I'm joined by Don. Don is a personal coach, and today we're going to be talking about all things masculinity. If you're listening today, have an open mind, and we hope you can learn something from this episode. Don, how are you?
I am having a beautiful day, my friend James. Just had a lovely cup of tea. Ooh, that's very hot, burning my hand. So I'm
let it cool down.
I'm excited to jump into these fascinating topics that you wrote to me.
Brilliant. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Don, and I have been working as a men's coach for a number of years. I would say maybe at least 5 or 6 years. And I got started initially just by wanting to help people and going through a lot of personal journey of discovering what my purpose is and why I'm here and what my values are, and a deeper, more powerful sense of what it means to be a human. I had a lot of very unique and challenging experiences in my life that made me question a lot of the narrative that I was told from a very young age. And I had to learn how to find my own path, which is challenging because you're not really given a blueprint on how to come back to you, right? And that took me a long time. I'd say maybe 15 years or so of traveling the world and meeting mentors and reading books and studying and meditating and all kinds of practices just to come back to understanding what this whole human experience is about and the tiny little cog that I play in the grand scheme of all things. And I, from that very grandiose way of looking at things, I said, well, the best thing I can do is to empower men to be the best way that they can be, because strong, competent, value-oriented, conscious, capable men are what are going to lead the world to becoming a beautiful, better place for future generations and for future millennia. It all comes down to that type of impetus that we need. And I found my role in that, and it brought me a lot of fulfillment and has brought me a lot of beautiful revelations and exciting experiences. So that's why I do what I do. And it's an honor and a joy to be here and talk about that stuff because it's fun for me.
Beautiful. Yeah. More conscious men. It's what we seek. Okay, before we get going on our conversation, we're going to play a quick game called 1 for 1.
Sure.
I'll give you a word, and you say the first word that comes to your mind.
All right.
Okay, so the first one is banana.
Yellow.
Plant.
Green.
Tornado.
Chaos.
Continent.
Expansion. Exploration.
And the last one is ocean.
Flow.
Brilliant. That's all? That is all. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all. I think that comes me down as well to do that. So that's why I do it. Yes, today we're going to be talking about masculinity. So the first question is, what defines masculinity?
What defines masculinity? Oh my goodness.
Probably a big question. Probably a big question. So
I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I had thought. I had thought a little bit about how I want to answer this because it's such a charged word. It's now for some weird reason become a very political word. I think that the way for the rest of this interview, or this is the way I approach things in my life in general, but I guess for the rest of this interview, I'm going to talk about these terms from energetic expressions, right? Getting sexuality out of it, getting sexual anatomy out of it, getting gender roles out of it. When I talk about this idea of masculinity and femininity, I look at it as like magnetism, right? So a compelling energy, something that creates, something that goes out and penetrates its will into the world, right? And as femininity, as receptive, receiving, incubating, growing, beautifying, amplifying, right? And the way in which that sort of primordial energy expresses itself shows up in our emotions. It shows up in our hormones. It shows up in our physiology. It shows up in gender roles. That I would say is the foundation of these layers of energetic expression. And so what is masculinity? Well, I think that from masculinity, from that standpoint, it can represent ways of being in the world. So when I think of masculinity, I think of form, right? You're building a foundation. You're building the house, right? What do they say? The man builds the house and the woman makes the home, right? So it's the foundation, the structure. When I think of masculinity, I think of physical strength, which then leads to competency, right? So you are capable of carrying physically as well as emotionally. There's a competency which comes with mastering one's craft, mastering one's mind, being a master of one's internal world. To really feel like a man, I guess, from my perspective, men want to feel respected and women want to feel loved. Of course, you want both, of course, on a higher level. But what I see in the behavior of men is that men are more interested in feeling respected than they are loved. Why is that? Because respect requires you to earn it, right? As a woman, they naturally have value. They're beautiful. They are fertile. They are graceful. They are attractive. A woman just exists and she has value. That doesn't necessarily happen for a man. It can, but it doesn't necessarily happen for a man. And the journey of a man comes to proving himself. He has to prove himself to the tribe. He has to prove himself to be worthy of a partner. He has to prove himself and go out and show that he is worth the respect that he has earned, right? Which requires competency. So if I'm a bumbling idiot that can't lead myself, that can't do anything, that's just a mess of chaos, I'll never be able to be competent. So nobody's going to follow me. I'm never going to lead anybody, right? Which then comes from a sense of loyalty to higher purpose, higher causes, principles, values, heritage, family, tradition, foundation, right? A loyalty to something that's bigger than themselves, that is beautiful, that's worth protecting and keeping alive, which means direction. Direction, you need to know where you're going. You can't just pick something and then change your mind. That's very flighty. That creates an environment in yourself and externally as somebody that's unsafe, somebody that's not decisive. And interestingly enough, somebody that's decisive then therefore can become disagreeable. If it doesn't align with virtue, if it doesn't align with your integrity, then you will say, no, this is wrong, and I'm going to physically and emotionally stand against what is wrong to stand in the truth of what is right. which requires focus, consistency. It requires presence. You can't be in your mind. You can't be in your dick. You can't be like in your heart of I'm in love. There has to be this alignment of laser focus of mission, presence, purpose, doing, creation, expansion, conquering. To me, those are the foundational expressions of masculinity.
When you're talking there, I heard you mentioned about. So when we're looking at, say, the inability to lead, do you think then a lot of us, I'm going to reference the men here, would follow because we lack that sense of knowing ourselves?
I think that element shows up sometimes, but I think a wise man knows when to follow and a wise man knows when to lead, because sometimes men are more competent at something than you are. And that doesn't make you less of a man. It just means that it's time for you to follow. And when you are called upon to step into a leadership role, you have the honor and the privilege and the competency to do so. I think that men have a tendency to fall into a passivity, follow. They don't know their purpose. They don't know their value or their place in society. And at any given point in our lives, we have to follow. We have to follow to know what it means to lead. I don't lead my dad when I was 6 years old. I don't lead my mom when I was 10. I didn't lead my teachers when they were teaching me. I had to learn what it meant to follow in order to lead. I think that as an adult male that has a job, that has a mission and a purpose and a meaning in his life, if he's only following, then there's an element inside of himself that he has not integrated yet. And that will take time. And it takes coming to understand yourself and your role in the world to see how you can lead. Right?
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. I just want to touch on the opposite energy, which is the feminine energy. So what is that?
Yeah, sure. Well, again, whenever somebody says the word feminine, we, as cultures and races and archetypes and religions and histories, we all have this collective understanding as to what feminine, that there's this expression in the human experience that means that something is feminine. And we can give qualities to something that is feminine, but it's interpreted differently by many people, but there is definitely a commonality of that. And again, I go back to this idea of energetic expression, not gender expression. So what do I mean by energetic expression? It receives, it nurtures, it amplifies, right? So it's like you give a woman food and she makes a meal, right? So it's any energy that you put into the feminine vessel incubates and amplifies. Like the woman's womb, you put a little sperm into it and it makes a whole full-blown human. So it is a fertile environment to grow and nurture and incubate beautiful realities. And so it's like the way that I look at femininity is like it is a ripe potentiality that the masculine penetrates, that creates the spark of creation that in the right environment germinates and then gives birth to something beautiful. It's what I would say is the archetypal expression of the Christian Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, traditionally, that is seen as all masculine forces. And I'll be a little heretical and say that I see that the Holy Spirit is more of a feminine force. It's like a creative force, right? Actually, the Gnostics call it Sophia. Sophia literally is where we get the word philosophy from, which is the lover of wisdom. Philo Sophia. Philo as in lover, Sophia as in wisdom. So the word philosophy is philosophia, the lover of wisdom. So this feminine force is what is the creative, energetic expression of what makes reality. So the Father is like a computer. It can be anything, but it's mechanical. It is a form. It is to be used. The Holy Spirit, if you will, the feminine force, is the creative inspiration from the muse, which spells forth into the potentiality to give birth to the physical Son, which is the creative expression of the masculine and the feminine combining together to create reality, right? So, yeah. So with femininity, there's a grace to it. There's a flow. You can't force something to be created. You can't force an idea onto somebody. So with that comes an agreeability. Nobody likes to be told what to do, right? So if a woman is difficult or disagreeable, they call her a bitch, or something like, there's that energy of, oh, you're being difficult or you're being masculine, right? So there's a pull towards, people don't like that feeling from women because it feels out of alignment with an expression of refined femininity, right? There's a gentleness to it. There's an incubation. There's an amplification. There's a comfort that comes with that. There's a receptivity. There's a being. It's like when you're with your mother, she tells you, oh, I love you. Oh, you're handsome. Oh, you're beautiful. Oh, you're great. And the father says, sure, but you need to be a man. You need to do better. It's sort of that stern Saturnian bringing it back down to reality of, okay, that's true. You are worthy of love because you're a beautiful human being that comes from the source and returns back to the source. But how do you show up as that fullest expression of yourself? So the feminine reassures with love. The masculine elevates to making you the highest expression of yourself. And if we fall too much into the femininity, we can become very passive. We can become fat because it's like, oh, here's cookies. Oh, here's sleeping in, or here's, oh, love and nurturing. And at that point, we fall into this lull of, oh, I feel so good. Oh, I flow. And then there's no direction. There's no purpose. There's no conviction, right? And so this is why your next question is why the balancing of the masculine and feminine energy is important. It's because in a way, when a lot of people are listening to this, they're like, well, yeah, I do that too. Sometimes I like to sit and like stuff my face with Toll House cookies and watch Netflix, or sometimes I like to go out and lift weights and so it's all of these expressions of masculine and feminine energy are within all of us. What makes a conscious, enlightened person, I hate to use that word because it's such a loaded word, but let's just use the word a mature person, a conscious person is aware of when these energies are playing out in their lives and when to pick and choose the right way to be. Or not necessarily the right way to be, but the most elevated and harmonious way to be. If you're gaining weight, if there's too much chaos in your life, you're not organized, you don't have discipline, then you need to work out. You need to join martial arts. You need to lift some weights. You need to get some perks. You need to make some money. You need to be a man. You know what I mean? But if you're too much in that, is there something going on? Am I being called? I'm so sorry.
No worries.
No, yeah, I was like, what is going on? I guess we can.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, my mistake. So again, going back to that, there's this energy of if I'm too in flow, if I'm too, everything's great, I'm just going to kick back and let life float by, we lose this masculine edge. But if we're too strong, if we're too firm, if we're too, we become boxy, rigid, and stiff, and we don't allow the grace in our lives. So the Tao, the balance, the middle ground that all these mystical teachers have been talking about, what is the Tao, what is the way, what is that, is the dance of the masculine and feminine. Now I push, now I wait, now I incubate, now I do this. And it's the feeling every day, every moment, every time in your life as to when to push my will or when to listen or when to integrate. It's like there's a great biblical quote that says there's a time for everything. There's a time to laugh. There's a time to cry. There's a time to dance. That's a reflection of there's a time to express yourself in different ways, and one is not bad or good. It's just
what
tapestry of life, and you just need to give yourself the tool when you need to use it, right?
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question.
Now, a lot of us would have been raised with. No, it does. It does. I'm just gonna use the way we are raised, for example. So for a man, he's raised to just go, go, go. Like he's not raised to embrace this feminine energy because, well, we didn't know about it. So, but he's just raised to be this strong, masculine man because that's what men are,
Yep.
and she's raised to be this soft, gentle person because that's what women are.
Yep.
So, when I'm raised with that, it's difficult for me to tap into my feminine energy, and it's difficult for her to tap into masculine because when she does, she gets called a bitch. And when I tap into my feminine side, I get called soft.
That's right. So there's a very interesting phenomenon that's happening on the earth right now. And I get a little conspiratorial, and there's a whole rabbit hole that one can go down in this. There's many different layers of this narrative. But just to touch on it a little bit, on my YouTube channel, I go way deep into what I believe is actually occurring on the world and what we can do about it. But from a very bird's eye perspective, from a grand perspective, we are in a transitory period in human consciousness evolution where our polarities are shifting and we are moving towards unity consciousness, which is a fluffy new age word for the harmonization of the two halves, right?
Yeah.
But the only way to understand the other half is to walk a mile in the other person's shoes. And so what is going on is that we are currently being bombarded with a ton of hormone inhibitors through microplastics, through water, through different types of herbicides and fungicides, and they're putting antibiotics and hormones and beef and all of these things and all of these types of microplastics as well as chemicals in our shampoos. We're bathing and soaking this in. And if you actually, there's a really great book I'd recommend called Countdown, and it looks at, since the 1980s, every year there's been a 1% decrease in global testosterone, which means that our grandparents have more testosterone than young men like you and I now. Because, from my speculation, there's a global, I would use the word, attack on hormones. Whether that is intentional or unintentional is a question that I don't necessarily want to explore right now, but I have my own particular ideas as to what's going on. But the fact of the matter is that that is occurring, and enough people aren't talking about it, and enough people don't understand the ramifications as to how this is affecting the hormones of men and women in general. And this is why I think we're seeing a lot more effeminate men, because I think that they are being born into an environment where there's a very high level of chemicals that are affecting their hormone production and the way in which their testosterone created. And there's many other factors to it. There was a lot of in the boomer generation. There was a lot of wounds around that, which created men to be very emotionally distant from their children, which then therefore the women raise the men, and then the women teach the men how to be, and that kind of changes their way of how they relate to other people, and it mixes all the wires up, and so many things. I mean, the pornography epidemic, how men are just constantly watching pornography and ejaculating every day and losing their seminal fluid and their testosterone, which is your mojo, and which makes you physically weak as well as emotionally and spiritually weak. And all of this amalgamates into what I would call a war on the sexes. And as his resolve becomes weak, as his willpower becomes weak, as his body physically becomes weak, it creates a vacuum. Somebody says the people that are experiencing these weak men ask, where's the strong person? Where's the strong thing that keeps it together? And as a vacuum has created, the women now step into this more masculine role, where you have the feminist movement and you have, the Me Too movement and a lot of these iterations of women empowerment, which is, I'm not saying that's bad, but I think what has happened is it's become misdirected, where over such a long period of time, women have been seen as second-class citizens, to men for a very long period of time. And in a lot of places in the world, they're still seen as second-class citizens. And it has created this sort of...
Yeah, totally.
It has created this anger in the collective feminine psyche, which says, if you don't value me as who I am, I will then therefore become like a man and compete with you in your own role. Right? And what that has done is it's created a very interesting dichotomy where women are now becoming more masculine in general, while men are becoming more feminine, and the polarity is shifting. But on a very deep archetypal level, we realize that this is out of balance as to energetically who we're supposed to show up as. But it is a tedious... Wow, everybody wants to call me now. It is a tedious transitory experience that we're going through now that is necessary for us to evolve as human species. Because if we don't have the capacity as men to be compassionate, if we don't have the capacity to be understanding, if we don't have the capacity to listen and wait and be present and be calm and incubate and wait for the right time, we'll just be like bull in a china shop. We're just like, I'm going to do, it'll just be the same 600, 700 years of empires and wars, kings, and it'll just be the same nonsense. But also, women don't step into that role of, I'm capable, I can do this. She won't feel like she has to rely on a man. She won't feel like a second-class citizen, because if she is raised in a society of gender roles, if one person dies, all of a sudden, that other role that other person was filling, there's a void, and they feel empty themselves. Like my father passed away 2 or 3 years ago, and this happened to my mother. There was a very traditional role. My father does this, my mother does this. And when my dad was dead, my mom was like, oh, I didn't know that I had to live this way. And it created this weird sense of codependency where she just fell into this weird damsel of, I can't take care of myself, even though I'm a 60-year-old woman. I'm not making fun of my mother. I'm just saying that this is a very common thing that happens when we live in a society that has such rigid gender roles. I talked to this one wealth manager friend of mine, and he said that they had to take emotional intelligence training courses as a wealth manager. And I said, why on earth would you need to do that? And he said, because the majority of my clients are old widowed women that have literally never taken care of their finances, and they're terrified and they're upset and they're distraught and they don't know how to organize themselves. So I need to be compassionate to understanding what she's going through to help guide her. And all of this polarization creates codependency. So yes, as actualized beings, we need to understand the respective energetic polarities and how they show up in our lives, and know that we can play that. Like I can play with the kids, if my wife or whatever wants to go and work, fine, you can do that, and I can play with the kids. I would just not prefer to do that, right? It's not like I'm incapable of doing it, and it doesn't necessarily make me less of a person if I do it. But as an energetic compulsion, I'd much rather go out and make my own empire, right? I'd much rather provide and protect and, and make my family feel safe and led in a next direction. So that's what's happening in the world, James. And there's a lot of factors that are making that happen. But the challenge becomes, how do we move into that actualized consciousness on the planet? And that's where I found my role in teaching men what's going on. And because I used to work with women, and then it became really weird because the women would be like, wow, that's so great, that's so beautiful. And it became this weird, like, emotional attachment thing. And I'm like, no, this is like, you're my client. That's not okay. Because really, in all seriousness, that's what people are craving in the world. They're craving grounded, competent, wise, heart-led, masculine presence. And it's so intoxicating to women. And if you show up that way in the world, oh my God, you'll have all the girlfriends you want. People will respect you. I'm really serious. And so it's...
No, I agree with you, yeah.
And so it's like, there's a really interesting socio-sexual psychology of something called hypergamy, which I think is a little bit primal. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily say that's the only way that women think, but this is a study about hypergamy. And if you're not familiar with the term hypergamy is that it's this social sexual dynamic where women date at their level or up.
Yeah.
And so it's like they're always looking for the top 1%, right? That they won't settle for lower. Well, men will just kind of get what they can get, right? What's interesting is that what's going on now is that women are playing in a man's field, and they're saying, well, I can provide for myself. Maybe I can protect myself, maybe, or I can delude myself into thinking that I can protect myself physically from people that want to rape me. Good luck with that one. But then they're basically in their mind, they're saying, okay, I can play at your field. What more do you have to offer to me? How are you different? I can do what you do. How are you better? And sort of what I'm trying to do in my work and the way that I work with men is showing men a more advanced and elevated state that is still, unfortunately, quite rare on this world, that women are really craving to have in a relationship. And that's going to fix a lot of the problems, because I've seen some of these relationships before where there was these boss babes and they were starting these businesses and doing all this, making all this money and working out, and they're like, oh, look at me. But they came to me and they said, Don, I am tired. I'm tired of a man's world. I just want to chill. I just want I just want to be able to be with myself and make my man some food and love him and nourish him after they've done that whole boss babe thing. Now, I'm not saying that that's the inevitable conclusion that women come to. Some women could really thrive in that kind of masculine world. But I would dare to say that most women, if given the option, probably wouldn't choose that. Right?
No.
And so if a man knows how to be nurturing and kind and heart open and emotionally available and present and communicates just like any normal human should.
Bare minimum.
It's a bare minimum for anything, then you're going to be able to differentiate yourself from in the sexual marketplace. Right? So that's what's...
Because you can't... because you're embodying both sides of, let's say, both worlds, but you're embodying both. And now you don't need to be great at it, but you're practicing both.
That's right. It's an element of conscientiousness. Right? Because, why do women nag? Well, they nag because a man is not present to what he needs to do. Right? If a man is present to what he needs to do, then a woman feels safe because a man is on his mission. He's doing what he needs to do. Right? The nagging stops when a man is in alignment with his highest good. Now, I would say that an immature woman nags. I would say that a mature woman inspires a man to be better in the way that she communicates to him.
Now, inspire and control are two different things.
Totally. It goes back to the old axiom of flies are more attracted to honey than they are vinegar. Right? And this comes in with a whole other field of conscious communication, nonviolent communication, understanding the other person's needs and communicating your needs and managing your emotions when they arise. So that comes with another element of mastery and maturity and self-awareness and ability to self-correct.
Just on communication. Now, that's one thing that us men struggle with. We know how to communicate the I don't know, let's say sport, for example.
Yeah.
But when it comes to communicating how we feel.
Well, I think that there is a very deep taboo around that, which is why I think there's a deep taboo around homosexuality, because historically, homosexuality is seen as an effeminate man, right? And so an effeminate man typically meant somebody that wasn't strong, that wasn't loyal, that was weak-willed, that was not competent. All the core foundations as to what creates the security of a tribe. If a man wasn't loyal, if a man wasn't strong, if a man wasn't competent, all of those things would make their society collapse. And so I think what has happened over time is that society has projected onto a very flamboyantly gay man as a man that is not capable of doing those things. And and sometimes that is true, and sometimes it's not true. I'm not a homosexual man, I don't know. But from my speculation, this is where I see this sort of dissonance to effeminate, flamboyant men, because I think on a very primal level, to somebody that is reacting to that, it means that that person is incapable of providing and protecting, or being the expression of a masculine archetype. And in a way, to men, it makes them feel unsafe, because when you're going to go out to war with your band of brothers, you want to make sure that they're loyal to you. You want to make sure that when you get shot on the battlefield, they're not just going to leave you there to die. You know, a man that is not afraid, a man that is afraid, a man that is weak-willed, a man that has other loyalties to different things will leave you to die. And so there's a very deep need for brotherhood. That's why people join fraternities. That's why people join the military. Yeah. That's why people have men's groups, right? Because we've sort of lost that. And to this point about why men have difficulty communicating their emotions, is because men have not been given the tools to express themselves, because there's such a taboo around being weak, around being incompetent, around being incapable, right? And if you are not given the proper tools to be able to do that, if you communicate in a way where you're like, oh, I'm so scared, you will be seen as weak and incapable, and you will lose respect by men and women. That will happen. Yeah. So how do we deal with that? Well, we have to have the emotional and the spiritual and the physical tools to be able to maneuver and manage our emotions without losing ourselves to our emotions. Because in a man's world, it's very black and white. There's no emotions, or I'm a blubbering loser that nobody likes and respects. That will never there's no in between area.
No, we struggle with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that going within and articulating what one is experiencing and getting very clear on the emotions and communicating it in a very calm, grounded, present way is a good step to communicating about how one feels about things. And I think very mature women, but there have to be very mature, and unfortunately there's not just in general a dearth of mature people on the world. I think in general, if you first want to get started communicating about these things, it's good to get involved in men's groups. Like I offer open men's groups where they can come on and talk, and we talk about these things. We give a space of non-judgment and support to where we're not like, oh, you're so beautiful, you go, dude. It's more just like, okay, we get it. What are you going to do about it? I have solutions to help you. There's a grieving time where you are validated in a way. It's good to be seen.
That's it. Yeah.
But at a certain point, it's like, okay, you're seen. What are you going to do about it? Right? That's the masculine impulse to do something. The thing that I actually found very interestingly enough is that a woman needs to be seen and validated to come up with the solutions. A man needs the solutions to then come to peace. So it's like you're operating on the other way. One has to do something to get the clarity. One has to be validated to get the clarity. You're still coming to the same end goal, but they're coming at it from different angles. And this is in a sense why talk therapy for men it's very stupid. And I wouldn't say stupid. I would say it's very
challenging.
I would say it's limiting. Because, what makes a man go into depression? What makes a man stressed? His inability to protect, his inability to provide, his inability to feel worth something. And how do you do those things? You get your ass out there and do it, right? But just talking about your feelings isn't giving solutions. It's wallowing in a pity party, So it's again, this is another element of the masculine and the feminine. Talk about your feelings, be witnessed, be seen. Now take the next step to overcoming that challenge. Because an unintegrated, brutish man will be like, grow a pair, go to the gym, or rub some dirt in it, or buck up, right? It's kind of like, yeah, okay, that's eventually what I need to do, but that doesn't necessarily help.
No.
And that's what creates men to be even more shut down when they become an element of vulnerability to who they think are their friends, but are actually just a bunch of immature, stupid idiots, and they shut them down and invalidate them. Then what do? Well, they shut down even further, or they open to your woman who is definitely not prepared for you to just, she'll be like, who the hell are you? What is
what happened to you?
Lose all sense of attraction to you. So the happy medium is to find conscious men, conscious, mature, awakened men to these principles that are embodying it, to ease into understanding the healing process. Because quite frankly, this is a healing process, right?
Yeah. And I think to be like in a men's group, it's quite powerful to witness that, like another man sharing vulnerably, because like that's not something we would have grown up seeing. So when you're seeing that, you kind of feel like it's okay,
because please,
it's like it's okay to have these feelings. That is nothing wrong with me. Like they exist because I'm a human being, and I shouldn't always have to push them down. That they're okay to come up. And
well, it's normal. It's the human experience.
Yeah.
I would say that society has been designed for everybody to not be harmoniously living in balance.
Oh, yeah. Should we teach that to kids? Don't feel this, don't feel that, don't feel this. And then go out to the world. And you can't even, most of the time we don't even know what we feel because we don't have the language to it. So we just think there's something wrong with me or something wrong with her.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's what's really started on my journey, was that when I was very young, I had this very deep sense in the world that something was really wrong. And I just, from a very young age, I remember walking around in the mall with my mom and being like, hey, Mom, doesn't everybody seem like a robot? And she's like, what do you mean, honey? I'm like, they're just doing their thing, and they're just, and they have their bags, and they buy their things, and they do what? Nobody seems real. And she's like, you're right, honey. And from a very young age, I sensed that I was almost in this video game where people were just so zombified that there wasn't really a way to get out of it. And then that really brought me into this whole deep depression throughout many of my years. I'm like, who am I? Like, am I a skater guy, a rock star? Am I a frat boy? Am I this? Am I like an entrepreneur? Like, and just trying many hats to kind of be like, who am I? If everything else is so wrong, then there must be something wrong with me, but only realizing that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just in a profoundly sick society. And I'm using other people's sickness as a frame of reference to my own confusion. Like the blind leading the blind, right? There's a great quote from my friend. He said that there are no healthy fish in a polluted stream. Right?
True.
So, and so I felt like that fish, and I really internalized it. Like, there's something wrong with me. Because clearly I'm not with this. And then when I came inside, I took some psilocybin mushrooms, which is profound. I highly recommend everybody take psilocybin mushrooms. It is incredibly life-changing. Unbelievable. It just really made me realize that I'm here to be the best version of myself, I'm only
Express,
going
yeah.
to do that. And the only unit of measurement that I need to have is, am I a better man than I was yesterday? That's it. And I can look up to other people that I admire and respect about their qualities and their characteristics. Ultimately, I'm the one that I need to be listening to. It all goes back from within. And then through that internal exploration, there was an entire new dimension opened up to me about. It was almost as if the wool was over my eyes. So I'm like walking around blind, and it was pulled off my eyes. I'm like, oh, there's so much more that was right in front of me that I didn't even know was there. And I sort of had to adapt. I'm like, what is this? Why do I feel this way? What is this? Why is that? So I had to find the language of what that meant. And I became very profoundly grateful that I wasn't the only one going through this, that this is what it means to be on the journey. This is what it means. And that most people don't even know that there's a journey to be had. And that many brilliant minds pondered and speculated and written volumes about the human experience, and that they have deeply thought about and embodied these archetypes, and their language and their words for helping you understand your journey kind of brings you back to reality, where you're like, oh, I'm not fucking nuts. Like,
no.
This is something that everybody's going through, and they're trying to figure it out too. So in a way, it made me more compassionate to other people that were like, you know, I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think once you start building that compassion for yourself, like how you view other people, it's completely different. It's just like you're not judging people as much as you would have otherwise.
Well, for me, I just realized that there's levels. There's really levels.
Definitely.
Like I'm fortunate enough to be visiting a new friend of mine, who I would consider to be a very high level person, very emotionally masterful, very financially masterful, just operating on different levels of real mastery, of many different levels. And I'm like, wow, this is a reality that I kind of knew was possible, but I didn't know what it looked like from a physiological expression. And then I would go into like London, and I'd see people like arguing and like choking each other on the streets. I'm like, oh, that's another reality that exists. And I see that there's many, 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 many different multiple realities simultaneously existing, coexisting, and superimposed on one another. And the quality and refinement that I have within myself expresses in harmony and actualization and self-transcendence outside of me eventually. But I have to realize that that reality is very rare for most people because they don't value it. They don't see the value in it.
No, you kind of...
And
no, we all kind of presented a reality and we go with it.
That's right.
And it's like, this is what life is now. Go on.
Yeah, and one of the biggest profound things that I had learned about, like much earlier on my journey, was that the concept of internal locus of control versus external locus of control, which is an external locus of control basically is a worldview that says everything outside of me controls me. And an internal locus of control is everything inside of me controls my external reality. And I shifted from why does nobody like me? Why am I unworthy? All these external factors mirroring back to me disempowerment within inside of myself. And then I turned, oh, I have control. Wow, I'm in the driver's seat. This is pretty cool. And it's so obvious, but it's so not obvious. Right?
Definitely, yeah. Because when it starts to show up first, you're kind of scared of it. You're like,
yeah. Well, really, because really what it truly means, when it really hits you, it's the one big, bad, scary R word that people don't like. responsibility.
Mm.
And people, it's very strange to me. Well, I was there before, so now I kind of understand why people are afraid of responsibility. But I think that I think people think of responsibility as this fear of missing out, that if I somehow become responsible for other things, then therefore I become accountable and there's a risk, and I don't want to have that risk. I want to be safe, right? So with responsibility comes self-sacrifice. And I think bad taste in people's mouths that sacrifice or devotion somehow takes away from somebody, that somehow I have to give up something to someone else, that I'm lessening myself. But for me to truly step into what I think it means to be a man, it's finding honor and deep satisfaction and deep satiation in being devoted to something greater than myself and loving the ability to be responsible and being so grateful that I'd done the inner work on myself to be like, wow, I can handle a lot of shit. Wow. Wow. People respect me and rely on me because I've earned it. Right. And to me, that brings me so much meaning and peace and comfort. One of the best compliments I ever got was, Don, I feel safe with you. It's this idea that somehow in my own journey, I've been able to create this space where people feel like they can be themselves. Just be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is hard.
100%.
In the modern day world.
Definitely hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, please.
One of my final questions to you is, what are some of the practices that I can take away to increase my masculinity?
Yeah. Well, I think that studying the archetypes is essential. Really good books that I recommend are Iron John by Robert Bly. There is another book called The King, the Warrior, the Lover, and the Magician. I don't recall the author right now. Studying the feminine archetypes as well, the women that run with wolves, and understanding the energetic expressions so that you're not going in blind when you see your woman wallowing on the ground, or when you see, when you see yourself being boyish or immature in the face of something that you should be really mature about, and having sort of a map of the soul, if you will. That's one intellectual thing that somebody can do. Physically, exercising. I mean, I know it sounds so simple, but how can a man have strong will and conviction if he doesn't do hard things? So by really falling in love with pushing yourself to your edge, pushing yourself to your limit, and bettering yourself every day, really changes the inner psyche of a man to where they say, wow, like, I've really gone through some shit and I'm still okay. Like, for me, I found that in martial arts. Martial arts saved my life. Doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and just good, do better, and getting punched in the face and crying and falling and vomiting and sweating, and just every day. You get up at 5:30 in the morning. You start training at 6 a.m. sharp every day. No excuses. You push yourself to the hardest, and you do that for years. That type of just raw primordial drive towards something really colors the soul of a man, I would say. Taking up some sort of martial arts, I would say, is foundational. I think every man, because how can you feel like a man if you can't protect yourself? How can you feel like a man if a bad person comes in and wants to kill your child and rape your wife, and you're just kind of like, like, what the hell, bro? I would say seeking out leadership roles, seeking out, taking on another project, even though you don't want to do it, being like, you know what, I can do it and I will do it because it's for the good of all. And not thinking about me, but asking, what can I do for others? How can I be a servant to others?
Yes.
Servant leadership. I would also say, stop watching pornography. stop masturbating. Like for me, that was absolutely foundational. I haven't ejaculated in a year and a half. I don't masturbate. I don't watch porn. I don't do any of that. I mean, I still have sex, but like I've learned a way to channel my energy to where I'm not like blowing everywhere and losing it, like, moving and coming into my center where I'm like in this stillness through the process and transmuting that kind of crazy, erratic, oh my God, I got to impregnate the world, and just bringing it here and holding it still, holding it firm. I mean, that's big. And there's a lot of books you can read. Montauk Chia is really good. Sexual alchemy, just looking into what sexual alchemy is and exploring that rabbit hole is foundational on so many levels. I mean, that's a whole podcast in and of its own. I would say really doing things to improve your testosterone levels. So taking things like ashwagandha, a little pinch of borax in the water is really good too. Make sure it's flavored or something. Make sure it's totally neutral. That actually has been shown to increase your testosterone by 15%. Taking things like Tongkat Ali, Shilajit, horny goatweed, ginkgo biloba is for your brain, fenugreek. What else is there? Maca root. So like a lot of these traditional herbs that you can take to increase your testosterone production. It's really helpful.
Definitely.
But the best thing you can do really is just let yourself do your own testosterone production, which is not ejaculating, because your main testosterone comes from your seminal fluid. And if you're blowing out your seminal fluid, guess what's happening? You're blowing out the best of what you got. And you're not letting your body reintegrate what you are naturally creating to create a life. Another thing that's really important is to put your phone on airplane mode. There's a lot of research that goes out to show that electromagnetic frequency has a horrible effect on sperm count. And if you are carrying your phone around all the time and it's pinging from different cell towers, it's essentially radiating in your groin, and it's that frequency is killing the sperm. And there's a bunch of different research papers that are out online now that you can look up. But essentially protecting your swimmers, man. Not exposing it to radiation. There's a lot of very outlandish things that people do. I've heard of people like putting sunlight on their testicles. That's kind of outlandish. But
that's a bit.
There's a lot of things. But those are the foundational things that I would say is preventative measures as well as increasing measures, right? So you can prevent things by not being exposed to things, and you can increase things by adding things into your life. So yeah, that's pretty comprehensive overview of what I would say would really, really help you.
Yeah. And where are you online? I know I found you, but like, what's your?
Yeah. So I'm on YouTube. My YouTube channel is called The Zeal of Man, and that's on my Instagram as well. I'm quite active on both of them. And because I've been traveling a lot, it's been hard for me to have a very consistent schedule with these meetings online. Groups, but generally I have them on Sundays. If you just want to contact me through DMs, I can put you on the emailing list where I give out the notifications as to when we have it. But yeah, just
you have
DMs and stuff. Yeah. What's up?
You have a men's group, do you, as well?
I do have a men's group. Yeah. I have an open men's group where people can talk about things, but I also work privately with clients about specific emotional issues. I have lots and lots of modalities and techniques that work, whether they're struggling with pornography addiction or relationships or goal setting or, trauma processing or anything really. Like if the men's groups are not enough, I deliver, but
And my last question to you, it's not related to this. What's one thing you're proud of in your own journey outside of what you do?
I would say I am proud of the man that I've become, and I'm proud of the man that I'm becoming, because the journey is so exciting and beautiful. And I can't even imagine what more there is to unpack.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a quick review on my Facebook page, Don't Be Afraid to Talk, or DM me on Instagram. The show notes will include all of the relevant links from today's episode. If you haven't already, please download, leave a rating, and share with your friends. You might just reach that person who needs to hear this message. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I am James Lumumba, signing off with gratitude.